The drone holds station at 1,200 meters and the footage lands on a desk in Helsinki. What it captured is not a tank column or a trench line. It is a photograph, a close-up of a man's chest and specifically of the small metal badge pinned there, a commemorative medallion, the kind issued to soldiers on an anniversary. There is a lightning bolt in the emblem. There is a unit number stamped on the reverse. There is a founding year worked into the border in raised numerals. And within 72 hours of that photograph appearing on a Russian collector's marketplace, the researchers at Check First, a Finland-based open-source intelligence company, have added the badge to a corpus that is slowly, methodically, converting military tradition into a blueprint of a secret organization. This is the discipline called phileristics, and in the past year it has done something that decades of Cold War intelligence work and post-Soviet investigative journalism had not managed to do. It has mapped the internal structure of two of Russia's most classified military and intelligence formations, using nothing more than the trinkets the units made about themselves. The word phileristics derives from the Greek philera, a metal disc worn as military decoration. Scholars have studied medals, badges, and insignia as historical artifacts for centuries. What Check First's analysts have done is reframe the discipline as a live OSINT methodology, a structured process for reading an adversary's order of battle from the commemorative culture it cannot bring itself to abandon. The central insight is almost embarrassingly simple once it is stated. Classified units still celebrate anniversaries. Officers still collect badges. Badge manufacturers still take orders and occasionally photograph finished work for their catalogs. And the internet still connects all of that to anyone patient enough to look. Let us walk the methodology step by step, exactly as Check First has described it in their published reports. The first move is corpus collection, gathering every photograph of every badge, patch, pennant, or challenge coin associated with the target organization. The sourcing is unglamorous. Researchers trawl websites and forums that specialize in Russian insignia collecting, the kind of niche communities that exist to catalog and trade decorations across all arms of the state apparatus. They search collector marketplaces, including platforms as ordinary as eBay, where surplus badges from veterans and their families surface routinely. And they consult the public catalogs of the manufacturers themselves. The Check First report on the FSB's Signals Intelligence Center named 3 companies by name: Goznak, Spetsnak, and Breguet, firms whose catalogs include the very commemorative coins and badges produced for units whose existence Moscow has never formally acknowledged. Those catalogs are not classified documents. They are a manufacturer's portfolio. The second move is the close read. What is actually on a commemorative military badge? More than most security officials would be comfortable knowing. A unit number, in Russian military nomenclature the Voyenaya Chast identifier, abbreviated V/Che, appears on a significant proportion of them. Anniversary dates reveal a unit's founding year and therefore its age, its institutional generation, its organizational context. Mottos and emblems carry functional signals. Lightning bolts conventionally indicate signals or electronic warfare roles. Keys, cryptography, globes and antenna shapes, interception. In a number of cases analyzed by Check First, coins for the FSB's Signals Intelligence Center carried something more direct still: maps and coordinates, embossed or printed directly onto the metal, intended presumably as a geographic identifier for personnel who already knew what the coordinates meant, but legible as a location indicator to any researcher who was paying attention. The third move is cross-referencing. Unit numbers and founding dates extracted from the badges are checked against the full body of available open-source material, prior reporting, leaked documents in public circulation, court filings, and academic records of unit histories. The goal is to confirm identities, link parent commands to subordinate formations, and connect identified units to the cities and garrisons where they actually operate. The fourth move is synthesis, aggregating dozens of individual badges into a complete organizational chart. Each badge is one data point. Assembled, they describe a structure that the organization itself has never publicly diagrammed. The first major demonstration of this methodology at scale came in July 2025, when Check First published a 36-page report titled OSINT and Phileristics, unveiling FSB's 16th Center SIGINT capabilities. The target was Center 16 of Russia's Federal Security Service, formerly Military Unit 7-1330, described in the report as Russia's primary signals intelligence unit, responsible for interception and cyber espionage operations. According to the Intel News coverage of the report, prior to Check First's work, only a single directorate within Center 16 was publicly known or acknowledged. The report identified 10 distinct directorates, spanning both defensive and offensive cyber operations. Researchers located approximately a dozen interception facilities positioned across the Russian Federation. The researchers estimated, and this figure should be taken as their professional assessment rather than a precise count, that the center employs more than 560 active personnel. Think about that for a moment. An organization whose existence Russia had never formally detailed, whose internal structure had not been charted by decades of Western intelligence analysis in open literature, was mapped into 10 directorates and a dozen facilities by reading the souvenirs it had made for its own officers. The sourcing chain for that finding runs through public manufacturer catalogs and collector forums. The geographic indicators came from maps printed on challenge coins purchased and photographed by enthusiasts. The unit number, the founding year, the functional emblems, all of it was self-published by the organization itself, pressed into metal for distribution among its own membership, then allowed to leak into the circulation of civilian collectors through the normal processes of attrition. Officers retire, estates are liquidated, surplus badges are sold. Check First described their methodology as explicitly replicable. The stated goal of the 16th Center report was not just to expose that particular unit, but to demonstrate that failuristics could be turned into a standardized OSINT tool applicable to any target that issues commemorative insignia, which in the Russian military means essentially every organization from the strategic rocket forces down to a logistics battalion. The second demonstration came on the 9th and 10th of February 2026. When Check First published what was simultaneously a methodological sequel and an escalation. The target this time was the GRU's Information Operations Troops, in Russian the Voiska Informationnych Operatsii, abbreviated VIO, Russia's military information warfare structure. The formations whose designated function is shaping perception, running psychological operations, and conducting computer network attacks. The research was credited to Check First analyst Florian M. The corpus was 118 photographs of award symbols, insignia, patches, and pennants honoring GRU units. From that corpus, as reported by Militarny covering the findings, the researchers identified at least 15 distinct units within the Information Operations Directorate, organized across 3 functional branches. The first branch is Psychological Operations. Military Unit 54777 is identified in the report as the central hub of this branch. Around it sit 6 regional units, numbered 03126, 03127, 03128, 03132, 03134, and 03138, assessed by the researchers as targeting specific geographic areas, though the researchers appropriately acknowledged that the precise geographic targeting roles of each unit were inferred from the available evidence rather than confirmed in documentary sources. The second branch is Decryption and Cryptanalysis. Here, the most significant finding, from a Western intelligence and attribution perspective, is the inclusion of Military Unit 26165, which open-source reporting and published United States Department of Justice indictments have linked to the hacking group publicly known as APT-28, or Fancy Bear. The unit assessed as responsible for, among other operations, the 2016 breach of the Democratic National Committee and the 2015 hack of the German Bundestag. That association predates Check First's work. What the failuristics report adds is its placement within the VIO structure alongside companion units 20697, 20766, 48707, and 78430. The third branch is Computer Network Operations, anchored by Military Unit 74455. Also connected in prior Western reporting to cyber attack operations under the APT Sandworm designation. The geographic footprint of these facilities, as placed by the researchers based on their badge analysis and cross-referencing, spans Moscow, St. Petersburg, Kursk, Yekaterinburg, Khabarovsk, and the Moscow suburb of Khimki. There is one further finding that the report flags with the appropriate degree of caution. Military Unit 55111, according to Militarny's coverage, may represent headquarters-level command for the VIO structure. The researchers themselves signaled this as their most uncertain assessment, noting that Unit 55111 lacks public award symbols. meaning the identification rests on inference from the surrounding architecture of the org chart rather than direct material evidence. This is precisely the kind of intellectual honesty that distinguishes serious OSINT from advocacy. Check First said, in effect, here is what the evidence suggests, and here is where the evidence runs thin. The report also carried a broader acknowledgement of limits that is worth quoting because it captures something important about how credible open-source analysis represents its own findings. Check First stated directly that the investigation does not resolve all outstanding questions, particularly those relating to the internal structure of the units, the number of officers involved, and the concrete observable actions they may have undertaken. This is not a disclaimer inserted by lawyers. It is a methodological position. The organization being mapped is a real adversarial intelligence structure, and the research was conducted from public sources. It tells you a great deal, it does not tell you everything. Check First said so. Now let us step back and consider the broader significance of what this methodology reveals, not just about these two specific organizations, but about the structural tension between operational security and institutional culture that the method exploits. The units at the center of both reports are not peripheral. The FSB Center 16 is the primary signals intelligence arm of Russia's domestic security and counterintelligence apparatus. The GRU's information operations troops are the formations whose assigned mission includes the psychological and cyber operations Russia has conducted against Western democracies, Ukrainian civil society, and NATO member states. These are not logistics battalions. They are among the most sensitive formations in the Russian security state. And yet they minted anniversary badges. They commissioned challenge coins with their unit numbers and their founding dates. They ordered from Gosnok and Spetsnok and Breguet, companies whose names appear in their catalogs alongside the organizational emblems they had pressed. The finished products went to officers who kept some, traded some, and in some cases sold them after retirement. Veterans moved. Families cleared out attics. Collector communities cataloged, photographed, and listed. The security failure that failuristics exposes is not a technical one. It is not a software vulnerability or a misconfigured database or a phishing email. It is something more fundamental. The inability of any large human organization to maintain perfect operational security when it also needs to maintain morale, celebrate cohesion, and reward service. The secrecy culture that protects the buildings and the budgets and the personnel records cannot protect against the commemorative impulse. Every 25th anniversary of Military Unit X coin is a self-authored record that the unit exists, when it was founded, what it values, and what kind of work it celebrates doing. This tension is not unique to Russia. Military organizations worldwide issue commemorative insignia. The methodology Check First has published is explicitly portable. The 16th Center report was framed in its author's own language as establishing failuristics as a replicable OSINT methodology, and the VIO investigation was the proof of concept, deliberately structured to demonstrate that the same playbook applied to a second target produced comparable results. What distinguishes the Russian case perhaps is scale. The Russian state security apparatus is extraordinarily large and extraordinarily compartmentalized, and it has a long cultural tradition of commemorative badge production. The collector community for Russian military insignia is correspondingly well developed, with dedicated forums, established dealers, and decades of accumulated documentation. That infrastructure is not a security asset for the organizations being studied. It is, in retrospect, a comprehensive open archive. There is one additional layer worth examining in detail because it speaks to the specific significance of the VIO findings. The information operations troops exist, as their name makes explicit, to shape information environments. Their function is to influence what audiences believe, to undermine trust in institutions, to amplify division, and to conduct the cyber operations that enable those goals. They are, in other words, in the business of information security in the broadest sense, controlling what information reaches whom and what it means when it does. They were exposed by the information they could not control, the commemorative record of their own institutional existence. Analyst Florian M. and the Check First team did not intercept their communications. They did not compromise their personnel files. They read the badges the units had commissioned to honor themselves, cross-referenced the unit numbers with public records, and drew the resulting org chart. The organizations whose mission is to shape perception were themselves mapped by the most conventional artifacts of military culture. This is the analytical punchline, and Check First's researchers did not underline it clumsily. They presented their findings, stated their methodology, acknowledged their limitations, and published. The implication was available to any reader. Before we close, it is worth placing this methodology in the context of the broader OSINT toolkit as it has developed through years of conflict analysis, particularly since 2022. The shadow geolocation methods described in other contexts, using SunCalc and SunAngle to pin footage to a specific location, operate on a similar principle. The world contains persistent physical signatures that analytical tools can read. Oryx's visual confirmation standard for equipment losses operates on a parallel logic. If there is no photograph, the event is not counted. What Failuristics adds to that toolkit is temporal depth. The badges being analyzed were not created yesterday. They were created over decades. The corpus builds slowly, but it accumulates, and each new image added to a collector database potentially adds another data point to an org chart that no Russian security directive can now unpublish from the open source record. The founders of Military Unit 71330 presumably did not consider, when they first commissioned an anniversary coin from Gosnak, that the serial number and the founding date embossed on the obverse would one day be indexed by a Finnish open source research company and corroborated against collector marketplace listings by an analyst sitting at a laptop in Helsinki. The unit number was put there for internal recognition, for the officers who already knew what it meant. It was not a vulnerability, in any operational sense that the unit's security planners would have recognized at the time of commissioning. It became one. That gap between what a piece of information means inside a closed community and what it reveals to a trained analyst outside that community is the fundamental observation on which all of Failuristics as OSINT rests. It is the same gap that social media geolocation exploits when a soldier photographs himself in front of a recognizable landmark. It is the same gap that satellite imagery analysis exploits when the shadow of a vehicle gives away its dimensions. The adversary produces the evidence. The analyst reads it. Check First has now demonstrated twice in peer-reviewed public reports that this gap is systematically exploitable for organizations that issue commemorative hardware. The July 2025 report on Center 16 was the proof of concept. The February 2026 report on the VIO was the replication. The methodology is documented. The source material, collector forums, eBay listings, manufacturer catalogs, is continuously refreshed, and the units themselves will keep commissioning badges because the alternative is to abandon the commemorative tradition entirely, which would mean abandoning a significant mechanism of institutional cohesion. The analysts at Check First and the broader OSINT community that their published playbook now equips will be at the desk when those badges appear.